Hi everyone, welcome to the lecture series on Indian polity. So far we have completed two lectures, that is Regulating Act of 1773 Part 1 and Regulating Act of 1773 Part 2. So this is lecture 3 which is going to cover the Regulating Act of 1773 Part 3. So lecture 3, the Part 3 of the Regulating Act of 1773. So we know that the Regulating Act of 1773 is going to be covered under 7 different sections, and here section 1 and section 2 we have completed in Part 1. 3 and 4 have been covered under Part 2, and now section 5, section 6 and section 7 are going to be covered under Part 3, right? Now we are going to cover 1.5, that is the Act of Settlement of 1781. The Act of Settlement of 1781. Yesterday while we are discussing the limitations of the Regulating Act of 1773, we have come across the judicial overreach. So what that is explicitly mentioned in the Act, the Supreme Court did not confine to what that is explicitly mentioned in the Act. It actually assumed more responsibilities or more judicial powers. That means in the 1773 Act, it was explicitly mentioned that the civil, criminal, admiralty, yesterday we have seen that, and ecclesiastical, so on these four fronts, on these four domains, the Supreme Court is going to have jurisdiction over the British subjects, residing in Bengal province. Here there are two catches. I mean, there are two different things. That means it is with respect to the subjects. So whatever the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court over these four domains will be applicable to British subjects only, one thing, and those residing in Bengal province only. So it is not applicable to those residing in Madras Presidency or Bombay Presidency. So those who are actually residing in Bengal Presidency, so British subjects who are residing in Bengal Presidency, they were subjected to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Fine. But it was nowhere mentioned in the Act explicitly that what is the Supreme Court jurisdiction with respect to Indian subjects residing in Bengal Presidency, right? It is not defined. And also with respect to company servants while discharging their official duties. So in their personal sphere, they might subject to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. But in their official sphere, while carrying out their official duties, whether they are subjected to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court or not. So these two things were not explicitly mentioned in the Act, but the Supreme Court assumed that at different times, I mean at certain times, the Supreme Court assumed that these two are also under its jurisdiction, and this led to the tussle between the Governor General in Council and the Supreme Court. So to avoid such kind of situations, to avoid such kind of problems, the British Parliament has brought the amendment, so the Act of Settlement of 1781, right? So the Act of Settlement of 1781, also known as the Declaratory Act of 1781, was enacted to address the jurisdictional ambiguity of the Supreme Court created by the Regulating Act of 1773. So the Supreme Court was created by the 1773 Act, but the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court was not neatly defined, not demarcated. So to have a clear boundaries between the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court and the authority of the Governor General in Council, this legislation was enacted, and it has two specific provisions. So the Act of Settlement having two specific provisions. So it is the total Act itself is related to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. To settle the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, this Act was brought, but it has two specific provisions. jurisdiction of the Supreme Court in relation to the company servants, and jurisdiction of the Supreme Court in relation to the Indian subjects. On these two fronts, the 1773 Act was silent. Yesterday also we have discussed that on these two fronts, I mean on these two subjects, that is Indian subjects and the company servants. On these two fronts, the 1773 Act was silent, but the silence was gone through the 1771 Act. Got my point? Right. So now we are going to discuss about the company servants. So jurisdiction of the Supreme Court over the company servants. The 1781 Act clearly stated that there was no Supreme Court jurisdiction, or else the 1781 Act confined the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court to the British subjects in their personal spheres, but not over their official duties. That means company servants while discharging their official duties were immune from any legal proceedings. Right? So this was made to clarify that although the company servants are Europeans, but while discharging their official duties, they were not subjected to the authority of the Supreme Court that is established at the Calcutta. So this was clear. This actually recognized Governor General in Council authority over the company subjects, over the company servants, and also cleared that the Supreme Court in no way entering into the revenue matters or the executive functioning. The Supreme Court taking up the executive functioning matters, Supreme Court taking up the revenue matters is prohibited through the 1781 Act. Got my point? Right. So the 1781 Act clearly prohibited the Supreme Court to enter into the official sphere of the Governor General in Council. So the official duties which were performing by the company servants were immune from the legal proceedings. Although they are the European subjects, in their personal sphere, if they've done anything wrong, then they can be subjected to the Supreme Court jurisdiction. But in their official sphere, if they have done anything wrong, if they have taken any wrong decision, but they are not subjected to the Supreme Court jurisdiction in their official duties. Got my point? So there is a legal immunity. There is a legal immunity that was granted to the company servants through 1781 Act. This was done because during the term of Warren Hastings, who was the first Governor General of Bengal, during his term, many of the company servants ended up in legal battles. Because of that reason, the British Parliament has enacted 1781 Act, the Act of Settlement of 1781, which clearly stated that the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court was restricted over the company servants. Right? Now, the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court over the Indian subjects, it was also not clearly defined in the 1773 Act. So the 1781 Act made it clear that. So actually, what happened means the Supreme Court assumed that even the Indian subjects were under their purview. Even the Indian subjects jurisdiction is also under its purview, and it has taken up the cases and it has applied the English law over the Indian subjects. But at that time we are having separate laws for the Hindus, separate laws for the Muslims in their personal sphere. Right? Muslims were governed using Shariat, Islamic law, and whereas the Hindus were governed through Dharma Shastras, Hindu law. But the application of the English law over the Indian subjects led to the widespread confusion, resentment. Right? So to avoid all such kind of situations, the British Parliament has clearly clarified through the Act of Settlement of 1781 that the Supreme Court has no jurisdiction power over the Indian subjects. So the Supreme Court's jurisdiction did not cover the Indian subjects unless and until if any Indian national willfully accepts the Supreme Court jurisdiction. So if there is a person who wants to apply English law to his case, who wants to apply English law to his issue, so then only the Supreme Court will be having jurisdiction over that particular case. Not not on all the Indian subjects, but in that particular case itself, the Supreme Court will be having jurisdiction over that particular case. This is one case, and the other case is if a person is an English Indian national, and there is another person European. If there is any case in between an Indian national and an European, then under such circumstances, the Supreme Court jurisdiction will apply to only this person, who was involved in a case with a European national. Got my point? The Supreme Court jurisdiction over Indian subjects will be applicable under two circumstances. The first one is if the Indian national or the Indian citizen willfully accepts the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, right? One thing, and the second thing is if the Indian national is in conflict with any European national, in such circumstances, the Supreme Court jurisdiction will be applicable, right? So apart from this, this is one story of the act, and the other one is the 1781 Act. 1781 Act recognized the diverse religious legality in India. That means the Indian personal laws during that time are governed through religious doctrines, and the 1781 Act has recognized that. And it made applicable that so Muslims will be governed using Shariat law, Islamic law, and Hindus will be governed by using Dharma Shastras. So this was explicit mentioning of religious diversity in India that was recognized in the 1781 Act. And this was made only to prevent any resentment among the local population, because 1781 means it is the starting days of British East India Company after assuming the political power. So it has assumed the political power in 1772. Direct control of the Bengal province was done only in 1772. So it is less than 10 years. So during that time, the resentment among the local population, will not be good for the East India Company. So to avoid such kind of situations, the British Parliament has enacted 1781 Act, and it openly recognized that the Muslims will be governed Muslims will be governed using Muslim law, and Hindus will be governed using Hindu law, right? Shariat and Dharma Shastras. Got my point? Right. So it is a clear mentioning of non-interference into the personal sphere of the Indian subjects. It is clearly mentioning that non-interference of the British East India Company into the personal sphere of the Indians. Right. So we have completed the section 1.5, the Act of Settlement 1781. We have dealt that. Now we are entering into the Pitt's India Act. William Pitt, who was the Prime Minister of the British Parliament during that time, under his name, this legislation was brought, right? So under Pitt's India Act, we are going to cover three different topics. That is Pitt's India Act 1784, reasons for the enactment. What are the reasons under which such a legislation was brought? One thing. Pitt's India Act, salient features. What are the salient features which are part and parcel of the 1784 Act? And the Pitt's India Act limitations. So this legislation also suffered with certain limitations, right? So the first topic, reasons for the enactment. Just a minute. Right. So the Pitt's India Act is also known as East India Company Act of 1784. So the Pitt India Act is also known as East India Company Act of 1784, right? The what we call the 1781 Act is also known as Declaratory Act of 1781. The Act of Settlement of 1781 is also known as Declaratory Act of 1781. We have discussed that. In a similar way, the Pitt India Act of 1784 is also known as East India Company Act of 1784. Right. So the reasons. The first major reason was the failure of the Regulating Act to create an effective administrative structure. The failure of the Regulating Act right. So the failure of the Regulating Act to create an effective administrative structure. So yesterday we have seen that. So 1773 Act has recognized. I have stressed this word multiple times. Recognized the dual character of the East India Company. That means what is that? What is the dual character? So from 1773, in the 1773 Act, the British Parliament has recognized the dual nature. So one is commercial nature, commercial functions of the East India Company, and the second one is political functions. Although there is a recognition of dual nature of the East India Company, but there is no separation of these functions. Both the functions still carried out by the COD, Court of Directors. Court of Directors themselves oversee the commercial functions and also the political functions. So there is no separate body or there is no separate mechanism that was created to handle the political functions. So this was the lack, and that was set right in the 1784 Act. And also in the 1773 Act, a parliamentary oversight was instituted, right? Yesterday we have seen that, instituted. So parliamentary oversight in the form of it mandated, 1773 Act mandated that the Court of Directors were required to send regular reports on civil, military and revenue matters on a regular basis. The Court of Directors are required to send civil, military and revenue matters. So reports on these matters, reports on civil matters, reports on revenue matters, reports on military matters have to be sent by the Court of Directors to the British Parliament. However, yesterday we have seen this in the limitations of 1773 Act, that there was no body or mechanism created to scrutinize such reports. Although the COD is sending those reports, there was no person to read them. There was no body to scrutinize them. Without scrutinizing, without reading the documents, how could you, without evaluating the documents, how could you take the proper actions? How could you take the corrective measures? So this was a very lacuna in the Act 1773. So this was corrected. In the 1784 Act. We will see that in the salient features, right? So this was a major reason, because of the absence of proper mechanism to scrutinize the documents that are sending by the COD. One thing, and the other thing is because of the non-separation of the functions into commercial functions and political functions. Although it recognized 1773 Act, although it recognized the dual nature of the East India Company, but it did not separated those functions. And still the Court of Directors were looking over both the functions. That means commercial functions and political functions. Both the functions are looking after by Court of Directors. This was the first major reason, right? And the second reason was administrative and diplomatic setbacks during. Right. This was very important, and here we are going to look into. Right. So, first Anglo-Maratha War started in 1775, right? So it is after the 1773 Act, right? After the 1773 Act. So one of the major provisions of the 1773 Act was the Bombay and Madras presidencies were subjected to the authority of Governor General of Bengal in matters of war and diplomacy. The presidencies of Bombay and Madras were subjected to the subordination of Bengal, Bengal presidency. So Governor General of Bengal having the sole authority either to declare a war, either to conclude a treaty. However, in 1775, Bombay Presidency, it entered into a unilateral treaty. I mean, it entered into a treaty with the Marathas without referring or without getting sanction from the Governor General of Bengal. The Treaty of Surat, 1775, was signed by the Governor of Bengal, Governor of Bombay, without getting a nod, without getting the approval from the Governor General of Bengal. So here the authority to sign a treaty, to conclude a treaty, or to wage a war lays with the Governor General of Bengal under the provisions of the 1773 Act. But in 1775, Bombay Presidency, I mean the Governor of Bombay, has signed the Treaty of Surat with the Marathas. I mean Raghunatha Rao. So in Indian history, you come across it, Raghunatha Rao, right? So Bombay Governor signed a treaty with the Raghunatha Rao, which is nothing but Treaty of Surat in 1775, without referring or without getting sanction from the Governor General of Bengal. After knowing this, in 1776, the Bengal Governor General of Bengal annulled or cancelled this treaty, and he actually framed another treaty, Treaty of Purandar with Marathas. So Raghunatha Rao was a contender to the position of the Peshwa. Right? So the Bombay governor signed an agreement or signed a treaty with the contender, whereas Governor General of Bengal signed a treaty with the original Marathas. I mean, those who are in the power. So Peshwa, this is the Peshwa seat. So already Madhav Rao II was in power. But Bombay Presidency signed a treaty with the contender to the position of Peshwa, that is Raghunatha Rao, in the form of Treaty of Surat. In 1776, Governor General of Bengal annulled this treaty, and they entered into an agreement or treaty with the Peshwa, not the contender. He was the Peshwa, through the Treaty of Purandar in 1776. So this is the story behind. So although there was a provision in the 1773 Act that Bombay and Madras presidencies have to be in accordance, have to act in accordance with the directions of the Governor General of Bengal in matters of war and in matters of diplomacy. But in practice, it was not there. There is no coordination among the three presidencies. There was no coordination among the three presidencies. We have seen that Anglo-Mysore War. During the first Anglo-Mysore War, 1767 to 1769, during that time, the lack of strategic coordination among the three presidencies resulted in the defeat of the East India Company. We have seen yesterday. Because of such reasons, the British Parliament has established the centralized leadership, and it made the Governor of Bengal to Governor General of Bengal, and he was given the sole authority. In matters of war and diplomacy. However, after having such provision in the 1773 Act, in 1775 itself, it was broke. It was not given any honor, and Bombay Presidency has entered into an agreement with the contender to the Peshwaship, that is Raghunatha Rao, in the form of Treaty of Surat, 1775. After knowing this, the Governor General of Bengal, Lord Cornwallis, he actually, in 1776, he was Warren Hastings only, right? So Warren Hastings, he entered into an agreement with the original Peshwa in the form of Treaty of Purandar in 1776. This was the start of First Anglo-Maratha War. Because of such reasons, because of non-compliance to the provisions of the 1773 Act, there was a major reason, right? There were setbacks. Because of such reasons, there were delay in execution, delay in taking decisions, This was clearly seen during the first Anglo-Maratha War, 1775 to 1782, right? So because of such reasons, the British Parliament again stressed that. And it mandated strictly that the Bombay and Madras presidencies must be conform to the decisions of the Governor General of Bengal in matters of war and in matters of diplomacy. Although this was explicitly mentioned in 1773 Act, because of the non-compliance during the first Anglo-Maratha War, it is again explicitly mentioned in 1784 Act. With a strict notion that it has to be mandatorily maintained by the Bombay and Madras presidencies. Got my point? Right. The third reason, growing necessity to assert the supremacy of the British Parliament over the East India Company. Growing necessity to assert the supremacy of the British Parliament over the East India Company. Right. So it was like, as said, there was no bifurcation of the functions. So both the functions, that means commercial and political, both functions are looked after by Court of Directors. Right. So the British Parliament has felt that there needs to be a mechanism. There needs to be a mechanism to handle the political functions separately from the East India Company, and these political functions must be under the aegis of British Parliament or British government. So the political functions must be brought under the purview of British Parliament or British government. So because of such reasons, because the political functions of the East India Company must be the political functions in India must be in alignment with the imperial policy of the British. So giving the political functions to the COD, giving the political functions control over to the COD will be detrimental to the interest of the British, to the colonial interest of the British. So having recognized this, the British Parliament wants to assert the supremacy of the British Parliament over the East India Company in matters of political functions. So it wanted to have the control over the political functions. The 1773 Act failed to establish such type of control. Actually, we also seen that British Parliament oversight was created. Similarly, British Parliament supremacy has to be established over the political functions. And whatever the British Parliament oversight or British Parliament supremacy, these two, I mean, in 1773 Act, British Parliament oversight was explicitly mentioned, and there was a provision with regard to that. Similarly, in 1784 Act, it was intended to establish British Parliament supremacy over East India Company, especially in matters of political functions. So these two, either through the 1773 Act, the oversight of the British Parliament, or the supremacy of the British Parliament through 1784 Act, these two were intended not for the benefit of the people of India, It was not there to oversee the functions of the East India Company, whether they are for the benefit of the people or not. No. It is not the case. So they least bother about the welfare of the people. They least bother about the Indian people. So these two were instituted only to align the East India Company priorities with British imperial policy. That is, so the British oversight or the British supremacy in the political functions were not meant for the welfare of the people of India. They are not meant for the welfare of the people of India. They are not for the good of the people of India. So they actually instituted either in the 1773 Act or in the 1784 Act only for aligning the priorities of East India Company in line with the British colonial policy. So to propagate the British colonial policy, to take further the British colonial policy, the British East India Company, the British Parliament wanted to establish control, establish supremacy over the affairs of the East India Company. Affairs of the East India Company. This was the reason. For this reason, the 1784 Act was enacted. So now we are getting into the salient features of 1784 Act. So parliamentary supervision over the company. So just now we have discussed that because of such reason, because of the absence of parliamentary supervision, although there was a provision in 1773 Act, although there was a provision in 1773 Act, there was a provision to send the reports to the COD by the COD in matters of civil, military, and revenue, but there was no mechanism. There was no mechanism to scrutinize. Right? This is one point. And the second thing is in 1773 Act. In 1773 Act, although it recognized the commercial and political functions, but they were not separated. They were not separated. This was a lacuna because the mere recognition of the dual nature of East India Company does not yield any good, right? So whenever it has given two different functions, those two functions must be dealt by two different bodies. It was recognized by the British Parliament, and that was constituted under the 1784 Act. Because of these two reasons, that means under 1773 Act, there was no mechanism to scrutinize the report that was being sent by the Court of Directors, one thing. And also in 1773 Act, there was a mere recognition of the dual nature of the East India Company. That means East India Company from now is going to handle both commercial functions and political functions. But there was no separation. So for these two reasons, 1784 Act was enacted, and the 1784 Act has created a separate body, with the name of Board of Control, in short BOC, right? Board of Control. This Board of Control is going to look after political functions which were actually looked after 1773 by the Court of Directors. So from the Court of Directors purview, the political functions are being taken away and they were given to the Board of Control. Got my point? And also the first thing. Second thing is the Board of Control is responsible for scrutinizing the reports sent by the COD. Whatever the reports that were sent by the Court of Directors to the British Parliament that are being scrutinized by the Board of Control, and if any anomalies and if any malpractices are found, corrective measures are also being taken by the Board of Control. So directions will be given by the BOC. So if the Board of Control found any anomalies in the reports that are being sent by the COD, then appropriate directions will be given by the Board of Control to the Court of Directors, right? So for the dual purpose, the Board of Control was established to separate the commercial functions from the political functions, and the political functions are being handled by the Board of Control from now onwards. From 1784 onwards, the Board of Control will be looking after the political functions, one point. And the second point is, just a minute. And the second point is, in the 1773 Act, although there was a recognition of the political functions and the commercial functions, the dual nature of the East India Company, however, both the functions are being carried out by the Court of Directors. So which, the British Parliament found it as a lacuna, and it wanted to separate, it wanted to distinguish the political functions and the commercial functions being held by the Court of Directors, and these political functions will be given to the Board of Control. And whatever the reports that were sent by the Court of Directors in matters of civil, in matters of revenue, in matters of military, that are from now onwards being scrutinized by the Board of Control, and if any anomalies are found, appropriate actions will be taken by the Board of Control. Got my point? Now we will see the composition of Board of Control. It is a 6-member body. All are MPs. Right, 6-member body. Out of this, 2 will be cabinet ministers. Cabinet ministers. The board of control is a 6-member body. Need not be MPs. All are MPs. Just now I said that all are MPs. It is not right. So the 6-member body. Just a minute. Let me. Right. Board of control. Its composition is 6 members, or we can say that 6 commissioners. Right. Out of these 6 commissioners, 2 are British cabinet ministers. Cabinet ministers, and 4 will be persons of knowledge in administration, revenue, and military. So there is a board. There is a board of control. There is a board of control which was created to look after the Indian affairs. Right? And out of the 6 commissioners, 2 will be British cabinet ministers. 2 will be British cabinet ministers, and the other 4 will be persons having knowledge in matters of revenue, in matters of military, and in matters of administration. Got my point? Right. So with the establishment of board of control, the 1784 Act, the 1784 Act established a system of dual control, over Indian affairs, between East India Company and the board of control. Between East India Company, between COD and board of control. So there is a dual control system that was put in place through the 1784 Act. So earlier, both the functions are under the control of COD. So there is a unified command or unified control. But this unified control was bifurcated into 2, and the political functions are being taken over by the BOC, and the commercial functions are taken over by the COD. And in practice, it has established a dual control over the Indian affairs, and this control is going to be shared in between COD and BOC. For commercial functions, COD will be responsible, and for political functions, BOC will be responsible. It is also a kind of lacunae or limitation. We are going to look into that a while from now. Right. The second feature. Right. So whatever the changes that are brought by the 1784 Act, now we are going to witnessing that. So yesterday, while we are dealing with the 1773 Act, the salient features of the 1773 Act, we have come across a chart like this, right? A flow chart like this. So this is under the 1773 Act. Yesterday we have discussed pre 1773 Act, right? And 1773 Act. This is the second slide of yesterday's class. So that is under the 1773 Act. Under the 1773 Act, Regulating Act, it recognized the commercial and political functions. We have discussed that, and made structural changes in the subordinate body in India. There were no such major structural changes. No major structural changes in the superior body that was situated in London. There were only 2 important changes that were brought. We have discussed yesterday. So everything in this slide discussed yesterday, right? So now we are going to look into what are the changes that were brought. What are the changes that were brought through the Pitt India Act to this structure? What are the changes that were brought? Just go through a bit. For a while, this slide. Core functions, commercial and political, and the Regulating Act only recognized them, not distinguished or not separated. Only recognized. And decision making will be at 2 levels: superior body in London and subordinate body in India. And in subordinate body, there were major structural changes were brought in, and there were no major structural changes were brought in the superior body that is situated in London, right? So in the Court of Directors, there were only 2 important changes. That is, Court of Directors were required to submit reports on civil, military, and revenue functions of the company administration in India. This was to bring parliamentary oversight over the Indian affairs. Yesterday we have seen that. And the term of COD was fixed at 4 years, and out of 24 Court of Directors, 6 directors elected annually for a term of 4 years. This was in a detailed manner we have discussed yesterday, so I'm not going to details again. So here in the subordinate body, under the provisions of the 1773 Act, the governor of Bengal was made the Governor General of Bengal and assisted by the council of 4 members. Remember this, 4 members. So the Governor of Bombay and Governor of Madras were made subordinate in matters of war and diplomacy, right? This was the slide we actually we have discussed. Right. Now we are going to look into the changes that were brought through the 1784 Act. So here recognize it, right? Whereas the Pitt India Act distinguished. That means there is a separation of commercial and political functions, right? So made the position of Governor General of Bengal more effective. Made the position. We have seen a limitation of the 1773 Act was Governor General of Bengal became a toothless tiger. Governor General of Bengal. The first major limitation that we actually discussed yesterday was Governor General of Bengal, a toothless tiger, because not effective powers, no effective powers were granted to the Governor General of Bengal, although the position was made more powerful on paper, but in reality, in practice, there were no significant powers granted to the Governor General of Bengal. So, having found that as a lacune, the British Parliament has enacted Pitt's India Act of 1784, and through that, it actually infused certain powers to the Governor General to become to make the position more effective. That means made the position of Governor General of Bengal more effective. So here, in the previous slide, we have seen that the council of 4 members. So Governor General will be assisted by the council of 4 members. And yesterday we have seen that as a limitation, because the council, whatever the decisions that are taken in the council are consensus based. Because of the consensus based nature, the Governor General feeling it as an impediment in matters of in emergency situations like war. So the council is not ready to deliberate on a particular decision or not to take a particular decision, right? So in such matters, the Governor General feeling kind of powerless. So to reduce that, the council of 4 members now reduce it to 3 members. So now the executive council will be having only 3 members, and in matters of war and diplomacy, the Governor of Bombay and Madras were subjected strictly to the authority of the Governor General of Bengal. Now we are going to look into them in a detailed manner, right? So there were major changes that were made in the London superior body. There were major changes in the 1773 Act. There were no major changes that were brought in the superior body that is situated in London, but in 1784 Act, some structural changes were brought. In the superior body in London. So those structural changes was, so the functions were divided, right? So the commercial functions will be looked after by the Court of Directors, whereas Board of Control. So Board of Control, a new body has been established to look after the political functions, and a body of 6 commissioners, 2 cabinet ministers, right, to handle the political functions of the East India Company. Got my point? So there were structural changes that were made. At the superior body in London, and there were changes that were made to make the position of Governor General of Bengal more effective. Whatever the limitation that we found that Governor General being a toothless tiger, so the British Parliament also felt the same, and they infused some powers to the Governor General of Bengal to make the position more effective. Now we are going to look into all those. Right. The second feature under the Pitt's India Act of 1784 was enhancing the powers of the Governor General of Bengal. Yesterday we have seen this as a limitation, that the Governor General being a toothless tiger. So on 2 fronts, the Governor General was lacking powers. One is within the council. Within the council, he was lacking the power, and other thing is in relation to the other presidencies, that is Bombay Presidency and the Madras Presidency. The governors of those presidencies are not listening to the authority of the Governor General of Bengal. On these 2 fronts, the Governor General was lacking powers, and this was found as a lacune, and the 1784 Act included certain provisions to make the position of Governor General more effective. That means here we are going to discuss the enhancement of the powers of the Governor General under 2 different fronts, that is in relation to the Executive Council and in relation to other presidencies. So yesterday we have seen this as a, so in relation to, first we discuss this. So here we have found that in 1773 Act, there was a council, executive council of 4 members. So Governor General in council will be a body of 5 members, 5 members, including the Governor General, and the Executive Council. The total strength is 5 members, right? So whenever a decision was put for review by the Governor General of Bengal, the body deliberates on that and it takes a decision. Under 1773 Act, it was happened that, so yesterday I have forgot to send one thing, that there is a casting vote. There is a casting vote that is granted to the Governor General in Council, Governor General of Bengal. Casting vote was granted to Governor General of Bengal. That means, what is this casting vote? The Governor General, under the purview of under the provisions of the 1773 Act, having two kinds of votes. That is, one is ordinary vote. Another one is casting vote. Like other member of the Executive Council, Governor General also casts his vote as an ordinary member. The Governor General also casts his vote. So this is a similar to the other members of the Executive Council. But the casting vote is a vote. It is a vote cast by the Governor General in situations of a tie. So if there was a tie, then the Governor General was empowered to cast another vote. So that is known as casting vote. Okay. So casting vote is nothing but the vote that is cast by the Governor General in times of a tie. So the Executive Council, so the 5 members of Governor General in Council, if a decision was put for voting and if there was a tie, then the Governor General was empowered to use the casting vote and he can take a decision over that, right? So what happened with the 5 members of Governor General in Council? So the British Parliament has found that 4 members Executive Council is deteriorating the authority of the Governor General of Bengal. Why it is so? Because 5 members. So if 3 members says no to a decision that is put forth by the Governor General, and 2 members say yes, including the Governor General, even because Governor General also casts his ordinary vote at the first instance. He casts his vote. So the 5 votes, out of the 5, 3 are saying no and 2 are saying yes. So there is no tie. Here, right? So the majority decision was no. So the Governor General cannot carry forward his decision and there is an end to the topic. Because of such reason, the Governor General felt very powerless, because if 3 members of the Executive Council, they wanted to block any important decision, they could do so. So because of such deadlocks in the executive functioning, British Parliament thought that the Council of 4 members is haunting the power of Governor General of Bengal. So it reduces the council to 3 members. We have seen in the slide. Okay, it has reduced the council from 4 to 3 members. So under 1784 Act, the council strength was reduced from 4 to 3 members. Got my point? And Governor General in Council now will be having 4 members, including the Governor General. The Governor General in Council, the body, will be having 4 members. So if a decision was put forth, and 2 members said yes and 2 members said no. 2 members, including the Governor General, a decision was said yes. The council said yes. 2 members said yes for a decision and 2 members said no for a decision. Under such circumstances, there is a tie. So under such circumstances, the Governor General uses his casting vote, and here the total will be turning out to 3. So majority, and the decision will be taken up, and that particular decision will be taken up. Got my point? So under 1773 Act, with the council of 4 members and Governor General in Council turning out to be 5 members, if 3 members trying to block any important decision, that could be possible. So the British Parliament has reduced the strength from 4 to 3. Under such circumstances, Governor General in Council will be turning out to 4. That means including the Governor General. So in the first instance, Governor General also casts his vote. For example, if 2 members says yes and 2 members says no, then there is a tie. Again, the casting vote will be used by the Governor General and turning out to be 3. That is majority, and the decision will be taken up. So with the Executive Council of 3 members, even if one member supports, the Governor General can take forward his decision. That means if whenever the decision of the Governor General was put to vote, if even one council member supports the decision of the Governor General, then that particular decision will be taken up, because one member supporting means Governor General's ordinary vote and this member 2 votes, and the other 2 members will be say no. Even though they say no, these 2 members saying yes, there is a tie. So again, the Governor General using his casting vote, turning out the majority to 3, so that decision will be taken up. Got my point? So because of such a reduction of Executive Council from 4 to 3, the power of the Governor General was enhanced. So we are under second feature, we are going to learn about the enhancement of the powers of the Governor General of Bengal. And we are going to learn this under 2 different sections, under 2 different heads. One is in relation to the Executive Council. In relation to the Executive Council, the British Parliament has reduced the strength of the Executive Council from 4 to 3. This 4 was under the 1773 Act. This was reduced to 3 under the 1784 Act. Got my point? When there was a 4, the strength of the 4, so Governor General in Council, the Governor General in Council will be 5 members, and even if 3 members trying to block the decision, that will be possible. Because there is no chance of tie. 3-2. So the majority decision will be taken up. So to avoid such kind of roadblocks in executive functioning, the council strength was reduced from 4 to 3, and even with the support of 1 member out of the 3 members, the Governor General can take forward his decision. Whenever 1 member supports the Governor General's ordinary vote and this person's vote turning out 2, and the other 2 council members saying no, that means 2 yes, 2 no. So there is a tie. So the Governor General his casting vote, so turning out to 3. So the majority decision, that is S, will be taken up. So under 1784 Act, the Governor General's authority over the Executive Council was enhanced in a way by reducing the Executive Council membership from 4 to 3. Got my point? Right. So this is in relation to the Executive Council. Now, so we are discussing enhancement of the powers of the Governor General in relation to the Executive Council and in relation to the other presidencies. So far we have completed this. We have done with this, and now we are taking up this, that is in relation to the other presidencies. So we have seen in the reasons that during the first Anglo-French War, during the first Anglo-Maratha War, 1775 to 1782, first Anglo-Maratha War, the Bombay Presidency acting, the Bombay Governor of Bombay acting on his own, has concluded a treaty, that is Treaty of Surat in 1775 with the contender, that is Raghunatha Rao. So with the contender Raghunatha Rao contended to the position of Peshwa. So the Bombay Governor concluded a treaty with the contender. So this was not accepted by the Governor General of Bengal. So he cancelled this treaty, and he entered into a treaty with the Marathas. That is original Peshwa, who is Madhavrao II. Treaty of Purandar, 1776 with Madhavrao II. So we are not entering into the details of who is Raghunatha Rao, who is Madhavrao. It is the duty of history, right? So to avoid this kind of situations, so this was signed in 1775, that is after the enactment of Regulating Act of 1773. But the Bombay Governor did not pay heed to the authority of the Governor General of Bengal. So to avoid such kind of situations, especially in times of war, the 1784 Act strictly mentioned that the Bombay and Madras presidencies must and should adhere to the decisions of the Governor General of Bengal, mainly in matters of war and diplomacy. There is a strict mandatory obligation by the Bombay and Madras presidencies to the authority of Governor General of Bengal. So Governor General of Bengal was made the sole authority in matters of war and diplomacy. So this was made even in 1773 Act. but that was not accepted by the Bombay governor. Bombay governor, acting on its own, has entered into a treaty with Raghunatha Rao. So to avoid such kind of situations, the 1784 Act explicitly mentioned, and a strict adherence was to be maintained. It was mentioned that Bombay and Madras governors must and should adhere to the decisions of the Governor General of Bengal in matters of war and diplomacy. So this is in relation to the second feature. The third feature is retention of companies' commercial monopoly. So we have seen that although the political functions were taken over by the Board of Control, the commercial functions are still under the purview of COD, Court of Directors. So commercial monopoly. So we again go to the same 1609. From 1609 till a future legislation, the monopoly rights or the exclusive rights will be active until and unless they are curtailed or they are changed by subsequent legislation. So far, there was no such legislation was brought in place by the British Parliament, so they will be continued. The same thing is mentioned: retention of companies' commercial monopoly. So the commercial monopoly is still on, and exclusive rights are still with the East India Company only. It was mentioned in the Act that the commercial monopoly of the company was not curtailed, not taken away. The company is still having commercial monopoly over the trade with India and China. Right? Got my point? So there was no change in the exclusive rights that were granted to the East India Company even through the 1784 Act. Even through the 1784 Pitt India Act, there was no change. The indefinite character of the exclusive rights was still on until and unless there was a separate legislation which was brought in this respect of exclusive rights. If there is any legislation that was brought, until and unless that time, the exclusive rights will be active. So the same thing is mentioned here, that is, the company is going to hold the commercial monopoly of the exclusive rights. Exclusive rights will be with the company only, right? So the COD will be having commercial functions, to look after the commercial functions, and also the COD will be having the power to appoint, dismiss, and to manage the commercial functions, to appoint the individuals to the positions of the governors, to the positions of other important positions in India, will be under the purview of COD. So the Court of Directors still having the power to appoint governors of different presidencies, right? So to appoint and to dismiss important officials in India still retained with the COD, Court of Directors, but such decisions must be approved by the Board of Control. Earlier COD was free. To appoint or dismiss any official. Earlier COD, Court of Directors, were free to appoint and free to dismiss any of the important official in India. But now even such decisions are still with the COD, but such decisions must be approved by the Board of Control. So the decisions have subjected to the approval of Board of Control. So whatever the decision, if a person X is appointed to the position of Governor General of Bengal, then such decision must be approved by the Board of Control under the changed circumstances of 1784 Act. 1784 Act, although it has recognized the commercial monopoly of the East India Company, but it has brought some changes to establish the British parliamentary supervision over the company, to establish the British supremacy over the company. It has made the important decisions must be approved by the Board of Control. Important decisions in commercial, although they are commercial in nature, they have to be approved by the Board of Control. So appointment and dismiss of the officials in India, they might be purely commercial, but such commercial decisions, such important decisions must be approved by the Board of Control, right? So in the third feature, we have seen that retention of the company's commercial monopoly. We have seen still the exclusive rights are with the company itself. And the important decisions of the Court of Directors are still remain with the Court of Directors, but they are subjected to the approval of the Board of Control. So appointment or dismiss of any of the individual from the Indian administration still retain with the Court of Directors, but they are subjected to the Board of Control approval. So the salient features we have completed, and this is the conclusion. The Pitt's India Act of 1784 emerged as a direct response to the administrative failures of the Regulating Act. We have seen the reasons. Under three different reasons, we have seen in what way 1773 Act was failed, and in what way the 1784 Pitt's India Act enacted. And diplomatic setbacks during the first Anglo-Maratha War, 1775 to 82, and the growing need to bring the company's political activities under the parliamentary supervision. To bring the company's political functions under the parliamentary supervision, BOC was created. And to avoid diplomatic setbacks such as those happened in first Anglo-Maratha War, 1775 to 1782, strict adherence was mandated for the Bombay and Madras presidencies in matters of war and diplomacy, and the authority of the Governor General of Bengal was elevated, right? So through the Pitt's India Act, for the first time, the company's territories in Indian subcontinent, were officially described as British possessions in India. This was missed in the 1773 Act. 1773 Act did not talk anything about the Indian territories, did not claim any territory of India as the British possessions, but 1784 Act has maintained that and officially described as whatever the possessions of the British East India Company in India will be called as British possessions in India. British, that means the sovereignty of British has been proclaimed here. The sovereignty of British over the territories that were under the control of East India Company has been proclaimed as British possessions in India. Although East India Company is holding those territories, it is holding the territories in the name of the British. So symbolizing a shift from the corporate dominance, to a state-backed imperial policy, state-backed imperial control, right? So the third thing is, thus the East India Company's commercial and political functions were carried as an agent of the British Crown. Got my point? So the 1784 Act, it was clearly maintained and clearly explicitly mentioned that East India Company is carrying out its commercial and political functions in the name of British Crown. This was not mentioned in the 1773 Act. You can mention this as a difference from the 1773 Act and 1784 Act in your mains answer writing. So 1784 Act explicitly mentioned that whatever the commercial functions, whatever the political functions that are going to be undertaken by the East India Company were undertaking in the name of the British Crown, because the territories that were holding by the East India Company in India are the British possessions in India. Got my point? So now we are going to look into the limitations of the Pitt's India Act. So the conclusion: by introducing the Board of Control, strengthening the Governor's General position, and preserving the company's commercial monopoly, the Act institutionalized. We have seen that there is a dual structure. Dual control system was established. Dual control, that means Court of Directors, Board of Control. So dual control on the Indian affairs. So this was also a lacuna. Actually, we are going to look into that in the limitations. So the dual control, that is Court of Directors controlling the commercial functions, Board of Control controlling the political functions. So the Act institutionalized a dual structure of governance that lasted for the next 7 decades. So whatever the structure that was put in place by the 1784 Act was only removed by the Government of India Act of 1858. So whatever the structure that was put in place by the 1784 Pitt's India Act was removed or was curtailed by the Government of India Act of 1858. Got my point? So now we are going to look into the limitations. First, lack of clarity in the division of powers between the British government and the East India Company. Now it is like COD, we have said that commercial functions, BOC, political functions, right? So COD is concerned with the commercial functions, whereas BOC is concerned with the political functions. But there are certain situations. There are certain situations which involve both political and commercial functions. For example, if you say right. So when matters of trade involving diplomacy, and princely states of India, So if East India Company pursue a policy to expand its commercial base, so it has to encounter, or it has to enter into certain agreements with the princely states, and it has to make certain arrangements with the princely states of India. Then either it is a commercial function or a political function. Can it be termed as a commercial function or a political function? So this is the reason, because although it is a point of view of trade, it is entering into the sphere of political functions. The commercial nature of the function entering into the political sphere. So then COD is acting as it is a commercial function, and with the involvement of the Indian princely states, because the involvement of the Indian princely states turning it into a political function, right? So BOC is also actively involving in such decisions. Got my point? So although there is on the paper there is a division of functions, COD is for commercial functions, BOC is for political functions. Suppose in case COD is expanding its commercial base, and in such circumstances, if it has to enter into certain agreements or certain treaties with the Indian princely states, then COD is claiming that it is purely commercial in base, purely commercial in nature. So we are the authority to handle that. But the BOC is claiming that because of the involvement of the Indian princely states, it is political in nature, and we are the authority to deal with such scenarios. Because of such reasons, there is no clear demarcation of authority, between COD and BOC. Between Court of Directors and Board of Control, there was no clear demarcation of authority. Because of such reasons, important decisions were delayed. There was administrative inefficiency, and frequent confusion within the colonial system. Got my point? So because of lack of clarity in the division of powers, which led to delays in decision making, confusion in the administrative structure, and these two led to the administrative inefficiency. Got my point? Although the 1784 Act distinguished and separated the functions into commercial and political, and commercial functions were given to the COD and political functions were given to the BOC. But whenever there is a situation that the two bodies claiming that particular sphere of influence falls under their purview. Just now we have seen that matters of trade involving the Indian princely states. So COD is claiming that it is a matter of trade, so it has to be under my purview. BOC is claiming that it is a matter of Indian princely states, so it is under my purview. Because of such reasons, important decisions were delayed, and there was a confusion in the administrative structure, which led to the administrative inefficiency in the British colonial system. Got my point? This is the first limitation. And the second limitation is allegations of nepotism and favoritism within the Board of Control. I have said that the Court of Directors were given. Just a minute. No. Just now I said that the Court of Directors, the commercial monopoly was still right with the East India Company, and Court of Directors were also given the authority to appoint or dismiss officials in the Indian administration, but those decisions were subjected to the approval of the Board of Control. So this approval of the Board of Control was used by the Board of Control to appoint their relatives, their friends, in the important positions of the Indian administration. The Board of Control used the nepotism and favoritism to appoint their known ones, their relatives, their friends have been given the important positions in India. So disrespecting the merit and favoring the nepotism and favoritism, the Board of Control has appointed unworth candidates. Unworth candidates, they are not worth, because the selection is based on the favoritism and nepotism and not on the merit. So because of such reasons, individuals were appointed in the important positions. Right? This was a major limitation. BOC was given the power to approve the appointments made by the COD. So COD, if the COD has, for example, if the COD has appointed some person A to a particular position, for example, Governor General of Bengal, to govern to the position of Governor General of Bengal, COD has appointed person A, but the BOC did not approve that. BOC did not approve that, and BOC wants a person B who is a relative to the member of BOC. So BOC wants the appointment of person B as the Governor General of Bengal. So until and unless COD until and unless COD accepts person B as the Governor General of Bengal, the BOC will be disapproving all the appointments. So COD has to accept B as the Governor General of Bengal ultimately. So there is a the BOC has to act impartially because it is a political body. It was created to bring efficiency into the administration, to look after the political functions in an impartial way, but it turned out to be nepotism and favoritism based selections. So whatever the discretion that was granted to the COD under 1784 Act over the appointments in an Indian administration were on paper only. The actual decision making in the appointments was rested with the BOC, and BOC turned down all the appointments of the COD until and unless their favorite candidates were appointed. So this was a major limitation, right? Right. The third limitation is dual control over the Governor General of Bengal. Dual control over the Governor General of Bengal. We have seen that COD is responsible for commercial functions and BOC is responsible for political functions. And in India, Governor General of Bengal is the ultimate authority in matters of war and diplomacy. Right. So here COD, BOC, COD will give some directions to the Governor General of Bengal. Similarly, BOC will give some directions to the Governor General of Bengal. Just now we have seen that in matters of trade with the Indian princely states, COC is claiming it is under my purview. BOC is claiming it is under my purview. Right? Under such circumstances, the COD will give some directions to the Governor General of Bengal, and BOC also give some directions to the Governor General of Bengal. But these two directions are contradictory in nature, or in conflict with each other. So COD is saying Governor General to do something, and the BOC is saying don't do that thing. So in such circumstances, the Governor General was perplexed to do what. So he was indecisiveness, either to follow the decisions of the COD or the decisions of the BOC. So when there are two conflicting directions from the COD and BOC, the Governor General was in a position to act on what. So under such circumstances, this is a triad of authority. Out of these three, two were sitting in London, that is COD and BOC, and one is sitting in India, that is Governor General of Bengal. So whenever a policy was misfired, or whenever there is an administrative failure, or whenever a policy was misfired, then the accountability was laid with no one. Because the Governor General is saying that it is not my responsibility. Someone is saying, the COD is saying to do that, I have done that, but it got misfired. COD is saying that no, it is not in my purview, it is in the purview of BOC. So BOC has made such directions. So such kind of escaping the accountability was found because of the dual control of Indian administration. Because of the dual control of the Indian administration, escape of accountability. So no one is responsible for the failures. The failure of administrative structure, the failure of an important administrative decision. If such happens, the Governor General has to take the accountability. But he is escaping by saying that this direction or this decision was directly came from the COD. But COD is saying that no, it is not in my purview, it is in political in nature. So the BOC has given such direction. BOC is saying that no, it is commercial in nature. So COD has given suggestion, so it is not in my purview. So accountability does not lie with me. Accountability lies with the COD. COD is saying BOC, BOC is saying COD, COD is saying Governor General, Governor General saying BOC. Like such, the escape of accountability, escape of authority has been prevalent under the 1784 Act. Got my point? Right. Now we have entered into the conclusion. So here we are going to look into the differences between the Regulating Act of 1773 and Pitt's India Act of 1784. So the Regulating Act actually recognized the dual nature of the East India Company, but it did not separate the functions. Both the functions are kept in the hands of the COD. We have discussed that, but the Pitt's India Act has separated them and had given the political functions to the BOC and commercial functions to the COD by creating a dual control over the Indian administration. Dual control over the Indian administration. However, this dual control also became a fiasco because there is a escape of accountability under this system. Escape of accountability under this system, and there is a frequent conflicts over the jurisdiction of the COD and BOC. COD is claiming that it is my purview, BOC is claiming that it is my purview. But whenever there is a failure of administration, then the BOC is escaping like it is the purview of COD. COD is escaping like it is the purview of BOC. Right. This is there is an escape of accountability because of the dual control over the Indian administration. Got my point? Now we are entering into 1.7, the Supplementary Act of 1786. There are 2 or 3 things we are going to discuss here. Right. The East India Company, it is also known as East India Company Act of 1786, popularly known as Supplementary Act of 1786, was enacted to empower the position of the Governor General of Bengal and to deal with the corruption among the company servants. If you note one thing, corruption and private trade, these are the 2 daunting things for the East India Company since the ages. Since the dual administration of Bengal, these 2 things actually dragged the company, East India Company, to the verges of the bankruptcy. But 1773 Act was silent on this, and also 1784 Act also silent on this. So to tackle this, 1786 Supplementary Act was enacted. Under this, 2 important provisions were there. One is to enhance the powers of the Governor General of Bengal. So we have seen in what way the powers of the Governor General of Bengal were enhanced under 1784 Act. Under 2 different sections, under 2 different fronts, the powers were enhanced. One is in relation with the Executive Council. Second, in relation to the other presidencies. And similarly, the British Parliament still found that those enhancement was still not sufficient, and further enhancement is required. So 1786, under Supplementary Act of 1786, it was further enhanced the powers of the powers of the Governor General of Bengal. Right. So under 1786 Act, Supplementary Act of 1786, we are going to cover 2 important topics. One is enhancement of the powers of the Governor General of Bengal. Enhancement of the powers of the Governor General of Bengal. Second thing is to curb corruption. So for the first time, British Parliament has focused on curbing corruption. To curb the corruption, several provisions were included under 1786 Act. So we are going to look into that. So Supplementary Act of 1786, we are going to read them. We are going to study them under two different heads to empower the position of the Governor General of Bengal. To enhance the powers of the Governor General of Bengal, and to curb corruption among the company servants. Got my point? Right. Now we are going to delve into the enhancement of the powers of Governor General under overruling authority. So we have said that there are 2 different fronts we are going to discuss under 1786 Act. One is overruling authority, and the other thing is the Governor General of Bengal was made the Commander-in-Chief. So we are going to look into that. To enhance the powers of Governor General, to elevate the position of Governor General of Bengal, the 1786 Act has made 2 changes. One is the Governor General was given the overruling powers, and the second thing is Governor General was made the Commander-in-Chief. Earlier, Commander-in-Chief was a different person, but the centralization of civil and military powers was made under 1786. So we are discussing the Commander-in-Chief topic a while from now, but here the overruling authority. So in 1773 Act, just now we have discussed that the Council of Strength is 4, Executive Council is of Strength 4, and Governor General in Council, including Governor General, it is 5. So when 3 members says no for a decision of the Governor General and 2 members says yes, still the majority with the no, so the decision will not be taken forward, right? So to avoid such kind of situation, 1784 Act reduced the strength of the Executive Council to 3. So now the present strength is 3, and with the Governor General in Council, it is 4. So even if one member says yes, the Governor General can take his decision or his policy forward. So 2 will be saying yes, 2 will be saying no. Out of these 2, one is Governor General, another one is the council member. So even with the even with the support of a single person, Governor General can take forward his decision, because in times of tie, the Governor General will cast his casting vote. So it is turning out to be 3. So the majority. So the decision will be taken up. So in such circumstances, it is okay. But in first, there is a situation where even not a single person says yes. Not a single person. No one says yes. That means if a decision was put forth for voting by the Governor General and only the Governor General says yes and all the 3 members says no. Under such circumstances, with the majority being saying no, the decision will not be taken up. So to counter such kind of situations, the 1786 Act has included a provision to override the council's decision, in matters of emergency situations, in matters of war, in matters of emergency situations. The Governor General can override his council's decisions. So Governor General has put a decision for the scrutiny, for the deliberation of the council, and the council turned out to be all the 3 members saying no for a particular decision, only Governor General saying yes. So under 1784 Act, the decision will not be taken up. But under 1786 Act, by saying that it is an emergency situation and that decision has to be taken up, by saying this, the Governor General still, without having the majority also, he can take an app. And his decision can be implemented. Got my point? So 1786 Act has given overruling powers to the Governor General of Bengal against the council decisions. The council decisions at times in matters of emergency situations can be overruled. This was included in 1786 Act. Got my point? So here, the overriding powers are nothing but a form of veto power. So if there is any question like through which of the act the veto powers were included to the Governor General, so it is 1786 Act. Just go through this slide. So 1786 has granted the Governor General the overriding powers, which is a form of veto we have discussed so far, and 1793 Charter Act has recognized the veto powers and it strengthened the veto powers. It strengthened the overriding powers. So recognized and continued this overriding power, formally incorporating into the administrative framework, thereby confirming the Governor General's authority over his council. So Governor General was given more powers over his council. So overriding powers were even strengthened under Charter Act of 1783. Under the Charter Act of 1833, the powers were even strengthened and they were centralized. That means Governor General's decisions now can be applicable to the Madras and Bombay, because the 1833 Act was the final step towards the centralization. So we will be discussing that in the 1833 Act. So Madras and Bombay presidencies were totally subservient to the Bengal province. So till 1833, the Madras and Bombay province presidencies are subordinate to the Bengal presidency only in cases of war and only in matters of war and diplomacy. But 1833 Act has made that in every other matter also, these 2 provinces are subjected to the authority of the Bengal presidency. So we are going to look into that. So in 1833 Act, the overriding powers were even strengthened and they were centralized. Centralized means the Governor General's decisions will be applicable to the Bombay presidency and Madras presidency. This is overruling authority. Now we are going to look into the civil and military authorities. That means Governor General of Bengal now has made Commander-in-Chief of East India Company Armed Forces. So he was made the ultimate authority from the military perspective. Earlier, this position was held by a different individual. But to enhance or elevate the position of the Governor General and to make quick decisions in matters of war, the concentration of civil and military authorities on a single individual was achieved in 1786 Act. In 1786 Supplementary Act, it was made that before to 1786, there was a separate military commander-in-chief of the EIC, I mean East India Company Armed Forces, and for the civil authorities, the ultimate authority will be Governor General of Bengal. But the military authorities, there will be separate commander in chief. Although the commander in chief is subjected to the authority of the Governor General of Bengal, but there are certain delays in the decision making. If the Governor General of Bengal directs a decision to the commander in chief, it takes some time for the person to act on, right? So to avoid such kind of delays, both the authorities were concentrated on a single individual, that is Governor General of Bengal. So through the through the Supplementary Act of 1786, the Governor General of Bengal was made commander in chief, and both the civil and military authorities were concentrated on a single individual. Right. So we have completed. The Supplementary Act of 1786. The first provision we have completed. Now we are entering into the second one, that is to curb corruption among the company servants. Right. To curb corruption among the company servants. So in the 1786 Act, so the corruption from the times of the dual administration of Bengal, it was a daunting factor for the East India Company, and the corruption and private trade are the two major factors which brought the East India Company on the verge of the bankruptcy. So the East India Company was on the verge of the bankruptcy because of corruption. So the 1773 Act or the 1784 Act did not include any specific provision for curbing corruption among the company servants. So this was the first act, 1786. The Supplementary Act of 1786 was the first act which was mandated certain provisions to curb corruption among the company servants. So under 1786 Act, it was mandated that all the civil and military authorities or officials, have to disclose their properties, whatever the properties they are having on their name or on their family names, right? They have to disclose all those properties within 2 months. Within 2 months of assuming office. That means if a person is appointed to a position in India, after assuming the position, within 2 months, he or she has to disclose all the properties on their name, on their family's name. So this was intended to curb the corruption. So after assuming the office, if their properties increased enormously, then it is found that he has entered into some corrupt practices. After assuming the power, if their properties were increased abnormally, then it can be concluded that he has entered into some corrupt practices. And the 1786 Act also included severe penal provisions for those who entered into corrupt practices. So those who actually practice some corrupt practices, so they will be punished with penal provisions, including criminal prosecution. So if found guilty, they will be penalized strictly under the provisions of the 1786 Act. Got my point? 1786 Act, the provisions of 1786 Acts are twofold. One is to enhance or to elevate the position of the Governor General of Bengal, and the second is to curb the corruption practices. Curb the corruption practices among the company servants. So these twofold provisions are under the part of Supplementary Act of 1786. This is the conclusion. So just go through that. Regulating Act of 1783, mainly to regulate the activities of the East India Company in the change in nature of its activities from purely commercial body to a semi-sovereign authority. The limitations of the Regulating Act of 1773 were addressed through a series of legislations which included the Act of Settlement of 1781, Pitt's India Act of 1784, Supplementary Act of 1786. Got my point? Right. So this is the end of the lecture. By this lecture, we have completed our discussion on Chapter 1, that is Regulating Act of 1773 and the aftermath. So it might be seemingly very lengthy, but trust me, you did not require any other textbook or any other online sources. If you listen to this lecture, that will be enough. So in a detailed manner, we have dealt all the things, the historical context, the reasons for the enactment of the Regulating Act, salient provisions, limitations. In a detailed manner, we have dealt. And to counter the limitations, what are the legislations which are brought by the British Parliament? We have dealt that under 1.5, 1.6, and 1.7 sections in the present day lecture, in the today's lecture. Okay, right. Hope you are liking the video. Thank you. Have a good day.